Okay. So first question is, how did I communicate with the masters when it first happened? Well, I think actually it a little bit depends on what you mean with communication with the masters, because I think all of us get certain promptings, intuitive promptings, even as children. And some of those come from the masters, some from my own presence. And for me, for a long time, it was just sort of a thought that came to me. And it often came in words, because I'm more thinking in terms of words than images. Some people are more visual, I'm more auditory. And I can't remember right now specific incidents, but so in the beginning, it would just be like short instructions. Even like this, I was talking about, you don't have to do anything on earth. To me, that was also a communication from the masters, to help me see this. And so often it would be like these short instructions. I actually remember one time, it would often be when there was something I couldn't understand. For example, I remember coming to the Summit Lighthouse in 1987 to their headquarters in Montana. And I didn't know that much about it before I came from Denmark, what it was like. So when I came there and saw how big of an organization it is, how many people were there, how they had just moved to the ranch in Montana from their headquarters in California, and things were still kind of not really settled, a little bit chaotic, a little bit messy. And I also came just before they were having this big summer conference where 3,000 people came in. So things were very sort of chaotic, or overwhelming when you came as a newcomer. So after I'd been there a couple of days, I went down to the river and I sat down and looked at the water, and I kind of felt my mind calmed down. And then I just sort of sent a thought to El Moya, and it was not like a clearly formulated thought. It was just like, what's going on? Help me make sense of this. How can I deal with this overwhelming experience? And the impulse that came to me was that I guess what I was subconsciously saying is, how can this be an Ascended Master organization, and how can it survive? How can it function? And the thought that came back to me was that as long as the organization has a direct connection to us, to the Ascended Masters, it'll be okay. It was not like trying to say there is no chaos, but he said that it can't go too far as long as it has connection with us, too far into, whatever, negative state. And it came to me very, very clearly, and it had an immediate impact on me. And I just accepted, okay, things are the way they are. I just have to adjust and make the best of it. But it also came back to me after Elizabeth Clare Prophet retired, and they no longer had a messenger. They didn't get a new messenger. And I actually felt at that point I was done. I was done with the summit, and I needed to move away, and I did. And I saw how the organization went through this very tumultuous period with a lot of power plays, where certain people were fired or frozen out of the organization, and some of the old staffers took over, and this kind of thing. So anyway, that was a tangent, but that was just what I can remember right now was my first really clear communication from the masters. And then I had another incident that I described before. While I was at the summit, Elizabeth Clare Prophet challenged my ego in a certain way. And it doesn't matter with the outer situation, but I decided I was going to not try to defend myself, not try to argue. I was just going to accept what she said and look at my own psychology. And then I went into I was at some university, at the rest of the class, they were watching a movie about one of El Moya's past incarnations, Thomas Becket. And I just sat down there, and then I just felt like I just let go. I felt this release. And then I felt this overwhelming love coming, and I really felt it was from El Moya. And it was just enveloped me totally, and tears were flowing down my eyes, and I just felt this, completely enveloped in this unconditional love. And there was no words there. It was just that sense that, and I felt that he was showing me that this is the love the masters have for all of us when we transcend a part of the human self instead of going into trying to defend it or explain it away. Because it was really a big break for me that I'd always been good at arguing, and analyzing and coming up with intellectual arguments. But I just decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to look at myself. And that really stayed with me. And ever since then, this has been my modus operandi on the spiritual path. I always look at myself, and I always have this with me, that I know when I give up something, some part of the human self, that's what the masters love. That's what the masters want. And that's really the essence of the path. And over the years, I would have these, when I was thinking about a certain problem, I had a certain question, it would take some time sometimes, but I would get this worded expression, very clear, concise, oh, that's how it is. I remember one time, I don't remember what I was thinking about. Oh yeah, I do remember. I was thinking about the will of God, because in the summit they were big on the will of God. And I always felt there was something not, it wasn't the highest understanding they had, because they always portrayed it as there's this external God who has a will for you, and it's the ego that causes you to rebel against the will of God, and therefore you need to submit your own will to the will of God. So it was almost this black and white, like you either have an independent will that's of the ego, or you submit to the will of God. And I couldn't have explained it back then, but what I can see now is I always thought, why does an individual will have to be based on separation and duality? It can also be based on who you are as an individual. I mean, you're not rebelling against God, you're just expressing your individuality. But anyway, so I had I had worked on this, I had wrestled with this question. And one day I said, okay, God, I'm willing to do your will. I'm willing to let go of my outer will and do your will. Just show me what your will is and I'll do it. And then there was this like silence. And then out of the silence came these words. What if the will of God is that you make your own decisions? And that was a shock to me too. I mean, it took me a long time to process this, because it really made me realize that it was just too easy to say, my will is of the ego and I need to surrender to the will of God. Because you become a robot. This is not the Christ that says this. Because as the Christ you have to discern what is the right thing in this, and not even what is the right thing, but what do I want to do in this situation? Not about what does God want to do, because God is not in my body. I am. So it's for me to decide, and it's when I make my own decisions and learn from them that I grow. I don't grow by submitting to this superior will up there. That's not why we are embodiment. And then, of course, the next really big breakthrough, I guess we're going over it now, was when I started working with Jesus and doing the website. And that was also, it was the same thing, and I can see the pattern now, that whenever I've had real communication from the masters, it's when I was in a situation where I surrendered something. And I described this before, so you probably already read it, but just briefly, I came to this point where I saw that so much of my striving on the spiritual path had been driven by a human ambition to be special, to be a good student. And I just let it go. I felt something in me broke, and I just let all that ambition go. And I had this moment where I felt that even though I had always had this need to feel I was doing something worthwhile on earth, I could let that go too. There was nothing I really wanted to do on earth. And I actually had this feeling from inside that, God, you can take me home right now. And if I had left the planet, this was in 2001, I think. No, 2002. So if I had left the planet, I would have had no regrets. I would have felt, I could leave. And so that was when I then felt Jesus' presence, and he said that, well, if there isn't something you personally want to do on earth, are you willing to do something for me? And that's when I started training to do the website and the questions and answers. So, I see the pattern. It is that I'm wrestling with some question, I'm asking for some direction, and then I surrender, I let it go. And when I surrender, there's room in my mind that the direction can come, because you don't have all the outer thoughts that are in the way. You don't have an intention of what answer you should get back. It's again this, the more neutral you can be, the clearer the answer will be. Because sometimes I think we even block the answer subconsciously. So when we come to this point where we are surrendering our opinions and beliefs about how things should be, then there's the opening where the communication can happen. And there's always a danger in telling something like this. And I remember this from the summit, where Elizabeth Clare Prophet would talk about how she became a messenger and how she first met the masters. And of course, in the summit, there was this whole consciousness that she was so special. And the danger is that people can think, oh, I couldn't have something like that. But look at what I'm saying here. It's not really that what I have gotten is so special or so epically important. It's just that the pattern is I think about something, and then I ask the masters, and then I let go of my opinions about what answer I should get. And then I get some kind of impulse. And I think many of you have had the same thing. I think all of you can have it. Because the masters, they want to communicate, they want to help all of you grow. So you see what I'm saying? Don't build it up that, oh yeah, Kim is the messenger, so of course he had communication from the masters. But I haven't had it, so there must be something wrong with me. The only thing wrong with you is that you haven't surrendered something, you haven't opened your mind to something so you can hear it. Because the masters want to help you grow. They want to help all of us.